Hey everyone, in this video I'll be showing you guys how to make stylized grass like this. I use Cinema 4D to create this animation, but the methods I talk about in this video will be applicable to any 3D software. So if you're using Blender or Maya for instance, the same principles will still apply. I'll be talking about the initial problem I ran into, the strategy I followed, and then how I went about applying that strategy into my scene. Alright, let's dive in. So here's a couple images from the scene I was working on before I added in the grass, and my first inclination was to just bring in a free 3D asset of grass and clone it a bunch of times. I put that into the scene and that landed me here. I didn't think it was terrible or anything, but it felt off to me for a couple of reasons. For one, I thought the grass was too realistic compared to everything else I'd made around it, which made it feel a bit disjointed from the rest of the scene. And two, it felt like I made the grass so detailed that it was distracting from what you're supposed to be paying attention to. I really just wanted the grass to act as a supplemental element to the background, but it felt like it was so noisy that it was really competing for the attention on the screen. So there's an artist I like named Christoph Niemann that talks about how he simplifies objects. He says each idea requires a very specific amount of information. Sometimes it's a lot and requires a lot of realism. Sometimes it's just one line. For example, a nose could be drawn with a bunch of detail to the point to where it's photorealistic, but it could also be drawn with just one line and it would still read as a nose in the proper context. Some objects like a blender or a helicopter for instance might require a bit more information until it reads as what it's supposed to. Every object has a different threshold for the minimum amount of information required for it to read correctly. I really like this idea that he shared, and I thought it'd be a useful template to improve the look of the grass in my scene. By default, grass is incredibly noisy and overwhelming to look at, and in the scene I'm going for, I don't think all that detail is necessary, so we can use that spectrum to maybe try and get a little closer to whatever the simplest version of grass would be, or at least one that would better fit the scene that I built. So instead of using the incredibly dense 3D model I originally used, I thought I'd try and create a very low poly version of grass to use instead. I made one blade of grass making sure to limit it to just a few faces, added a bend deformer to it, and then cloned it to create a bundle of grass. Then I made a few copies that were slightly bigger or smaller to give some variety. The original grass had a wide array of colors in it, and I thought that I could simplify that as well to make it less overwhelming to look at. I ended up constraining all the grass within a range of roughly these colors. Now that I've simplified the grass, I can use this as my new template and clone these objects along the ground to see how it looks. I made a test animation and everything was looking great, but when I brought it into my scene, it didn't look quite right. Even though I reduced the amount of detail pretty significantly, it still felt too distracting and that it didn't fit the rest of the scene. The grass was still too noisy and I needed to find a way to reduce it down even more. I was a little confused on how to move forward at this point since I had reduced the grass down to just a few faces already. It didn't really seem possible to reduce farther than that, but then I realized that the issue is that I was trying to render every single blade of grass, which really wasn't necessary. So I thought, what if I combined a lot of these blades of grass into bundles? I thought that'd be a great way to reduce the amount of overall noise in the grass. I decided to do a quick painting of a bundle of grass in Photoshop and then brought that into 3D. I put the painting of grass I made onto a plane and then made the rest of the plane transparent. It looks off if I move it to a side angle, but as long as I make sure the grass is facing the camera, it looks alright. So using that as my new template for the grass, this is where I landed. Now I'm afraid I have too little detail, so I brought just a smidge of detail back in by adding variation to the scale of each bundle of grass, and then also adding some variation to the rotation so that the light hits each bundle at a different angle and illuminates each one slightly differently. And I was quite happy with this result. This felt like just the right amount of detail to have for the grass, and I feel like this landed me in the sweet spot I was aiming for, where I have just enough information to register that this is grass, but not too much to where it's distracting from the rest of the scene. And that's how I made stylized grass that fit appropriately for the scene that I had built. If you're curious to see the final project, the link to that video is in the description, And thank you guys for watching, and I hope this was helpful.